This is the Brandon Smith Show, and I am your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. And so today, we are going to talk about leadership. I know that's a big, broad topic. We talk about leadership in this show pretty regularly, but we're going to talk about particularly what are some of the challenges and needs for leaders today, some of the unique dysfunctions or obstacles that they might be encountering, and ways that we can overcome those, whether we're men or women, and even some of the differences around that. So to help us on this journey, I have my good friend, Angela Raub, joining us. Ange.
Thank you.
So good to see you.
Such an honor to be here.
I've been waiting for this day. You and I have been talking about this day.
For so long.
Like,
and it's
when
Friday
are you
the 13th.
I know. So Ange just gave it away. This particular show is pre-recorded, folks. But that's okay. Doesn't mean it's not relevant for us right now. So, Ange, I want to dive down this topic. You and I were jamming on this a little bit, and I know you've got a lot to share, particularly in your role at Leadercast today. So, you are the Chief Sales Officer for Leadercast.
That is correct.
That is correct. I got that right, folks. I got that right. I was worried I was going to flub that up. So, in your role at Leadercast, I mean, this is a lot of what Leadercast does. It's trying to find solutions that meet leaders where they're at today and help them go to the next level. Is that fair?
It's very fair. And we actually, it's quite interesting because sometimes people don't know who we are. And those that do, we have an incredible group of evangelists around the world who just love us. But it's funny, people think of we're just the one-day world's largest leadership event, and you're an inspiring or a day of inspiration, but that's it. But we actually have solutions that we provide to organizations and individuals 365 days a year.
365 days a year.
Yay!
That's
we
awesome.
do.
I love that tagline.
Thank you.
But it's needed. It's needed. Absolutely. Okay. So before we go into our topic, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Share with our listeners and viewers your journey. How did you get into this space? Because I find the space of becoming kind of an evangelist for leadership, people all have different stories and journeys that they get there. So what's been yours?
I have, thank you. You know that we talk about being a positive leader, and a positive leader can be a little girl on the playground that encourages positive and inclusive play. And so it's interesting because I never really thought, hey, I want to be a leader one day. It just happened as far as through my whole life, because I love to be an encourager and have a huge heart, and somehow then people would start to follow through having direction or being strategic. And so it's interesting, and why it's such an honor. We always talk about, for you as a friend, you've watched me as a leader develop, and in particular over the last, I would say 7 years, of really trying to diversify my cross-functional experience and working within different industries and things like that. But that's been hard, and you and I have shared those challenges, and you've coached me and you have encouraged me. And so 7 years ago, I was at a host site for Leadercast and watched my favorite female executive, Angela Ahrendts, who at the time was CEO of Burberry. And I thought, wow, I love this brand. And my boss at the time was like, you need to work there, but don't leave me. And so then when I started interviewing several years ago for Leadercast and thought I was going in for one position, and then they offered me this position, after I got that offer, I went to my car, I cried. You were part of that story. You got to hear that when that offer came across to me. But it's an absolute honor to take my experience in executive education, as well as my passion just for a positive world. And I think that it's our prime responsibility as leaders to make the world a better place. And through this today, who we are, I hope, and I know we are out in the community, it sounds like a Pollyanna approach to life, but man, at this point, it's what our world needs. And I get to do this every day around the world. Amen.
Amen. Yes.
I know. I'm trying not to be emotional when we're talking about this.
More positivity, encouragement. I mean, you're right. It's a real need.
It is.
We need that more now probably than ever.
And Andy Stanley has a great podcast, and we have our Leadercast Now library. It's 700 videos of 3 to 5 minute leadership solutions. And so it's really cool. But I just watched his last week, one of them full length on visioneering. And he talked about people can say that they want a leader who has integrity. But honestly, people follow a leader who provides clarity. And so someone can be corrupt, but pretty clear in their mission, and will have people follow. And his example was honestly with someone as horrible as a Hitler, right? Because of the clarity of messaging. And he was not just this horrible person. And so I think that we need to look at, as leaders, how can I be so clear? But the good news with social media is no one can hide anymore. Bad leaders can't hide. Eventually, it's coming out. But for those of you, we were talking earlier prior to this starting, is around the world we hear, I just need someone positive that I can trust, but that's clear in where we're going. And again, it's that clarity piece with positivity and wanting to just truly make a big difference.
Yeah, and I'm all about that today. And I think it's just because the world is so messy. It's messier than ever with all the noise. I talk about this all the time on the show. Time's everyone's most precious resource.
Yes.
And everything's urgent all the time. And so nothing feels clear. Priorities don't feel clear. Focus areas don't seem clear. Boundaries aren't clear. And so driving that clarity is an important piece.
Absolutely. And I think that that's what, as we have people reach out to us, Leadercast becomes, again, that day of inspiration for them, because I don't think you can motivate someone. That's a choice, right? But you can inspire someone. And I actually just watched The World's Greatest Showman about P.T. Barnum and him talking about joy. And, anybody who makes a difference is not like anybody else. And so I think to recognize, for leaders to recognize their individual team members and the different nuances in the individuality they bring, and to honor that, is where we'll see organizations truly start to transform, hence inclusion, right?
Yeah.
Where we take everybody for where they are, who they are, and then how can we lever the strengths that they bring to that as an individual to the organization.
So in your role right now at Leadercast, you're spending a lot of time interacting with organizations all over the world, really, and talking about what are their needs and what are the problems or pain points they're seeing and how they develop their leaders. What are some of the things you're hearing, patterns or themes that are popping up?
Well, and things that, and I love watching, following you on LinkedIn, Brandon, and I always share things. Today in particular was fantastic. But it's that transformation, it's change management, and it's not even how you manage the change, it's keeping the people engaged through their spirit. That is what we hear over and over and over again, is that, okay, great, organizations have people working virtually, but they are matrixed and people have different people they're constantly communicating with. And so hence there's no clarity. But also we lose that true palpable emotion of belonging to something. And I think that's what we see in our world as well, which is when you talk about all this noise, if someone doesn't feel that they belong in certain places, the noise, they start to listen to it as opposed to deflecting it. Does that make sense?
So when you say they don't belong, is that they don't feel like there's a commitment by the organization for them? They don't feel like they really belong there? Or is it in their role? What?
I think through employee engagement would be how we make them, not that they do not belong, but they are not feeling engaged. And I think that as organizations have really focused on how do we have greater profitability, and let's have a workspace that people can come in only one day a week. There are all these studies that show us how people can be more effective. They may be a little bit more happy, but then we're also seeing that people don't feel as engaged. And so how do you balance that? And I think that that's why our old-time organizations struggle through this change. But I think even new leaders are trying to figure out what's the best way to keep this thing going. I mean, because even people in our age group we're hearing
still some young emerging leaders.
Yes,
just to be clear.
Yes, in the 40s, we still mark that box. But with that is, they're only going to, what are statistics saying? They're only going to be like 7 years in a job at the longest term. And so times are a-changing. And I mean, not only on career management, but how do you truly move up within the organization? And then I think where people start to, we talked about feel disengaged or not belonging, is how in this landscape do you even know when to plug in? Plug in meaning your commitment and that you really want to move up within the organization.
Oh my gosh, this seems so messy.
It is messy.
So I'm hearing a lot of things in this. I'm hearing, okay, so as we're trying to be more efficient and maximize costs and people's time, we do more virtual things, allow people to work remotely, but then they don't feel as connected.
That's right.
So what's the balance between in the office versus out of the office, and how do you manage virtual workforces? There's the part of, if I want to move up in the organization, it's no longer, I've heard that term before, you've heard it too, not a career ladder, it's more like a career lattice.
Yes.
Right? So rather than going up, I'll maybe go across or wherever I go to kind of get up there. And then is there even going to be a commitment? Do I want to commit to the organization? Are they going to commit to me? Or is this more like just a dating thing for a little while until they go a separate way, Because we see a lot of that. You and I were speaking, not to name the organization, but we were speaking before the show about an organization where we have multiple friends.
Yes.
And they had a reduction of force. And it was, and these were people very committed to the organization.
Absolutely.
And so you never know when that day is going to come. And in big companies, that day seems to be coming a little more frequently than it used to.
Yes. It's funny because you referred to this relationship as dating, and my team can tell you that probably ad nauseum, they're sick of how I always correlate that. But if the dating landscape has people swiping on a Tinder or a Bumble,
yeah.
And that's the mentality of not a match, and they're quickly flipping through that. Think about that mentality in the workforce and the teams that you managed, coupled with someone that's never seen that. And so when we talk about the disparity of understanding for each other, it makes sense. I mean, here we are, but I truly believe optimistically that as positive leaders, we've got to talk about the mess and bring that out first, and then really come back and figure out what is the best way to keep this engaged. But man, if leaders aren't positive and if they can't deliver that message to their teams, they're sunk. It's scary. But I think that for people like you and I that are evangelists,
I'm moving your mic a little closer to you.
Oh, that are evangelists. For positive leadership, it's what we need. But those times have changed, and I'm excited. I think it's a time where we're going to see some traditional leadership programs and the way we deliver that people said, oh, it's going away. I think we're about ready to see more people say, no, man, I need to come to a conference to be inspired, because I'm not getting it.
This wasn't exactly where I thought I was going to take our conversation, but it's where I'm going to take our conversation.
Oh, boy.
So I know. That's the way I roll, folks. That's the way I roll. Unmedicated as usual. So positivity. This has been a theme that you've brought up since the beginning of our show. So when you think about positivity as leaders, I want to spend some time talking about that right after the break. So stay tuned. When we come back from the break, Angela Raub's going to talk to us about positivity. How can we be more positive as leaders? And then we'll dovetail into some of the differences between men and women as they grow as leaders. So we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, this is Brandon. I want to take a moment to thank you for listening to my show. We wouldn't have a show without you. In an effort to get you the topics, guests, and resources that'll make your life better, I need your help. Go to theworkplacetherapist.com, www.theworkplacetherapist, all one word, .com, and take the listener survey that's all about you and your needs. We'll be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card to one lucky listener. I look forward to hearing from you. Let's eliminate dysfunction together. Welcome back from the break. This is the Brandon Smith Show, and today we are talking about leadership and developing leadership, and it's taken an interesting and I think very important turn. We've talked about positivity and how do we become more positive as leaders, and how do leaders become positive leaders. So to help us with this journey, I've got my good friend and Chief Sales Officer for Leadercast, Angela Raub, with us. So, Ange, we were talking about this, and I kind of threw this curveball.
I know.
Like right before the break, we're going to talk about positivity as leaders. So when you think about leaders that do this really well, what does positivity in leadership mean to you and look like for you?
I love this because I think positivity does not necessarily have to correlate with someone always delivering the happy Pollyanna message. Positivity in leadership for me is an authentic, transformative leader that is clear in message, the good and the bad. And hence, I think that's a positive leader because there are no unexpected turns. And people can put the glasses on for that leader and think when they are away from the team or away from the company that they have such clarity of where they are taking that organization or driving that organization. And so it could be a transformative time, but that leader and how they're constantly honest and authentic to their organization is where they have trust. And I think through trust is where you would say is a positive leader.
I think that's definitely true. It's interesting that you take that turn of, it's almost this unvarnished transparency and honesty that can help create that. And there's a chapter in, now it's some of an old school book, but Good to Great. It's called Level 5 Leadership, I think it is. And in that chapter, they reference this military leader who's really good about who just shared that here it is. And I got to experience this firsthand. I was working with a residential real estate builder in 2007, 2008. And this particular builder, they were getting right up, as you remember, 2008, 2009, that fun little part of the roller coaster where you go down and your hands are up in the air and you're going, that part. Remember that part, folks?
I do.
We came up. It always comes back up. But so this particular leader, who was the owner of the business, big business, he came into the room and he said, look, folks, here's the deal. Things are not looking good. It's going to get worse. I have no idea where the bottom is. And he was very clear and specific on what that meant. And he said, but it's going to be okay. And we're going to get through it. And we've got work to do. And you could feel the anxiety in the room started high because everyone could sense this was coming. And by the time he was done, just delivering that honest, not good news, the anxiety was dropped. There was no anxiety. There was just a calmness, like, okay, we can deal with this.
It's I love that. One thing at Leadercast, we are in a time of transformation. And so as we have compressed the team to make sure that we've right-sized the organization as we now scale. And I explain that to my team as you are at the bottom of the ocean and your tanks have just failed. And so I promise you, I'm going to keep communicating to you as your lungs feel like they're collapsing. But our feet are almost on the bottom of the ocean. And when we push off, you aren't going to remember what that feeling felt like. And we're feeling that. But what's cool is for leadership like this gentleman to be able to say that, my team will come to me and say, Ange, are we at the bottom yet? And so in their mind, they're like, I'm trusting you to tell me and we are. And so as that's going up now, and we have exciting things that are happening, but that's how you build trust. Because I mean, any one of us, it's like going to the doctor and they're saying it's going to hurt, right? This is going to be really bad. I love my doctor who does that because I know what to expect and there's such a trust, and that's a positive experience, although it was painful.
Yeah, I totally get it. And you added another important point without saying it explicitly, and it's regular communication along the way.
Absolutely.
Keep those lines of communication open. I often preach in absence of communication, people assume the worst.
Oh, well, and let's be honest, organizations that sit there and have a State of the Union or a town hall, if you're not positively communicating to your teams, trust me, in 3 seconds, they're texting each other or slacking each other. And so you've got to be so point on. And that's why when you spoke earlier about if you aren't filling it up, there's so much noise. You've got to be so intentional on that communication and that positive, infrastructure that you're trying to build in the organization. But we have a lot against us. And I think it's that transparency that's tough.
So I love you start with, okay, just be transparent and honest about the situation. And if we apply that to kind of the emotional energy of the organization, it will drop the anxiety.
Yes.
Keep that regular communication going, keeps the anxiety low. It kind of is a natural suppressant of anxiety. And I think there's another piece too. What's the role in terms of painting a vision from your perspective as a leader? Something because we think of visions, at least I think of inspiration when I think of a really good vision.
It's interesting that you say that, because I know, and again, watching this movie the other night with just an amazing promoter that P.T. Barnum was, right? So I've worked with two different types of leaders. One that was very much the world's greatest showman and could sell a story, and you'd leave and you'd had tears and you've had joy. And then I've worked for someone who was just pretty darn honest, that wasn't real sexy in their approach, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I would rate the one that wasn't the showman or the show person as the greater leader. And so when you talk about that, because you can sell a vision, but like any great salesperson, you've got to have everything backing it up. So I think that's another telling point for positivity and leadership when you asked about what that looks like for me, is you must be able to have that message delivered and share that vision and bring it to fruition. But it can't just be the show person in you. It's got to be, and again, we've seen organizations since 2008, some that certainly crumbled because they had some great show people at the helm that had people buy into that, that started making decisions that weren't right.
You know, this is taking a turn
I did not
expect.
I love this conversation.
It's just like grounded honesty, transparency, and now we're talking about credibility and consistency.
Yes.
Right? We're not talking about anything really sexy. It's not like a big show with lights and,
it's not.
You know, this rosy picture. It's all this other, just this fundamental stuff. I had read this study, this was probably about a year ago, and they asked the question of what's the worst kind of boss to work for? And I expected them to come back and say, oh, obviously it's going to be like the crazy abusive boss that's like yells at you and screams at you and calls you names.
Yes.
Was not the worst. The unmedicated bipolar boss was the worst. The one was totally unpredictable. One day there's like a big party, and the next day someone's getting fired. And then a party, and then someone's getting fired. That was the worst. And so you're speaking to that point in another way. You're saying that steady, you make promises, you deliver on those,
That's right.
You communicate regularly. You're kind of the rock in the middle of all this storm that's swirling around us. That time's everyone's most precious resource. Everything's urgent all the time. You become that rock. And that is what is a positive leader.
And it's about interdependent relationship, right? Not codependent. And so I think when you talk about that with the bipolar, I think of the boss that you are a plant withering in the corner, and then today they want to water you. And that's where people are like, that's what I don't like. And so when you want to mitigate dysfunction in the workplace, and which ultimately affects the world, because you and I can talk about that forever, leaders and organizations, you have the greatest responsibility of truly what happens in our world, because that goes to your home, right? So how you are as that boss. And so I think that people need to really own their leadership roles as well. And because that's a huge responsibility. If you have a multinational organization that you lead, you literally, your decisions, your demeanor, your transparency, and who you are affects hundreds of thousands of people.
And what you feel is going to affect hundreds of thousands of people. I think that's really important too for leaders, is they often think, well, I feel this, but no one else can tell. That's not how that works. It bleeds into the system.
Absolutely.
And I have so many leaders that I work with in large publicly traded companies that are anxious and they're worried, and so they just make everything urgent throughout the organization.
And we talk, yes.
Yeah, and pat themselves on the back and say, I'm a great leader. And they're a horrible leader. That's horrible. They're just creating all this unnecessary anxiety. It's unfocused.
It's, I literally am having an aha moment as we're sitting here today, because I think of, as my organization, I'm dealing with transformation for our team, and I have an amazing team. But I have a couple people that I felt frustrated that they're not coming along on the positive train. And so it's interesting right now, as you've brought up a couple points of ways that I need to improve as a leader to get them there, because their style of learning and who they are and the differences that I have from them in personality, this has just been fantastic, because it is about that clarity. You talk about the consistency, but I've had an unrealistic expectation just because I have had this positive, you know me. I mean, this bottle of water could be a little bit like a fourth full, and I would say, it's full. Brandon, look hard enough.
Look at how much water we have. It's great. the last days.
It is. But again, that's how we stretch as leaders. And that's why we have conversations with people like yourself. And that's why I say this to you all the time. That's why more people need a workplace therapist, because to get out of your own head and really put your arms around the responsibility you have as a leader. I don't think that people want to be honest with that. And so to your point about the people that are like the sense of urgency and they're like, I am a great leader, man, hopefully people get more secure, that they'll reach out to people that can really help guide them through those times and get out of their own head.
Yeah, and I think the one last point I want to add to this before I kind of segue to, actually, we got to get to close. So can you believe it?
It's so fun.
Already, because we didn't even talk about the difference between men and women. We'll have to do that at a future show. But I also think it's really important on where that leader's orientation is, because we see too many leaders today want to prey on fear or prey on insecurity as a way to rally. So you can drive clarity and use fear as the foundation for that, or you can use insecurity as the foundation for that, or other elements, and say, but you can count on me, which is actually a codependent. You mentioned codependent, and it really struck that for me, because now you need me. I'll rescue you from all that scary. So you don't look over there. It's super scary. I'll be your savior, which is not. That's different from, say, having a very purposeful orientation where you say, we're going to achieve this great thing that's going to make a difference. And here's the situation, and we're going to do that together.
Absolutely.
And I think that,
love that.
I think that's an important distinction in this too, orientation. Because when you talk about clarity and some of the other tools we talked about, in some ways they're morally neutral. I mean, you can use them for good or bad, depending upon your orientation, which is, like deep down, what's your motivation?
This is so deep. I love this. And I don't think that people are willing. Obviously, we know that that's, if someone's not willing to look at what's at their core, that's why they are someone that's driving by fear or through that. And so how do we, what is the solution to that? How do we get to, I guess, through vehicles like someone listening to this podcast, or, how do we do this? Because
it's tricky,
super
because
deep.
If you're a leader who's doing that, you may not realize it, but B, you may be like, well, yeah, of course I'm doing this, because, that's how I get power. You often see the studies that show there's more narcissists at senior levels.
Oh yeah.
And they're preying on things like fear and insecurity. Now, as people inside organizations, you can tell if that's happening to you. You can easily tell if that's happening to you because you can feel it. If you're feeling yourself just in a fearful place all the time, or feeling insecure and down every time you go to work, something in that system is causing that.
If you're doing a Google search, do I work for a narcissist? You probably know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But also, I think and many people, I had someone just talk to me about that they are actually making sure that they have gotten on a subscription list with daily devotional for someone who works for a narcissist. And I'm like, what are we doing, man, in the world we're living in? When you have to seek therapy, not only probably for home life situations, but goodness gracious, now for your work environment, which is where you spend most of your time.
Absolutely. So I ask all my guests this question at the very end. What's one life hack you have for us to make our lives a little more healthy, a little less dysfunctional? And this can be personal, it can be professional, really anything. I think if you are not going out to your, I do my own 360. I was doing it every year, and heard a great person that talked about just sending it out, and I did that. So I would just send it, what is it like to be on the other side of me? And so I think my life hack is, if you're not asking several people a week, what was it like to be on the other side of me this week? I think that you're cheating yourself and the people that are around you. And so I think to have honest feedback from those that love you, and maybe those that are just in your organization, is the best way to try and stay real and transparent. And you talk about your orientation, where you're coming from, is the best way to do that. Yeah. Awesome.
So.
And your gift.
Oh, you're the best.
I am so glad you were able to make it on the show, and you have to come back.
I will be back.
I'm sorry, you just don't have a choice.
An absolute honor. one of my favorite people.
And if people want to learn more about you and Leadercast, where can they go?
They can go to leadercast.com, and we're so excited for our women's event on October 12th at the World Congress Center with an amazing cast of female speakers, an inclusive event for all people to attend, simply women because of our speaker cast.
Great. That is the best plug I've had on my show yet. Fantastic. Well done. Excellent. I encourage you to go. Check it out. And thank you for listening and watching today. Continue the fight every week as we try and eliminate workplace dysfunction. One workplace, one leader, one life at a time. And follow us on facebook.com/Brandon Smith, WPT for the Workplace Therapist. And of course, check out my website, The Workplace Therapist. You just Google The Workplace Therapist and you'll find it. It's pretty easy. So until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.